They told me I was invisible to them, until the helicopter landed and everything changed. My name is Evelyn Brooks, and on the day my younger sister received her master's degree from Stanford, my parents pretended I didn't exist. The sun was blazing over the university quad. Rows of white chairs stretched across the lawn filled with well-dressed families holding programs and pride. I sat alone, way in the back, dressed in a plain navy jacket, a soft cap tugged low. No one turned to greet me. No one even noticed. And that wasn't new. From the second I arrived, it was clear I was an afterthought, if I was even a thought at all. I hadn't RSVP'd. I hadn't been invited. But I came anyway. Because I needed to see it for myself. I needed to see just how far I'd fallen in their eyes. Up front, my parents sat beaming under the reserved section. My sister Olivia walked across the stage in crimson honors cords, her name announced with fanfare and cheers. The future of biotech, the program read. A Stanford rising star. I scanned the glossy printout in my lap. My name wasn't there, of course. Not in the family bio, not in the acknowledgments, not even in the special thanks. Just nothing. Like I was never born. I could hear my mother's voice floating through the soft chatter ahead. Olivia always had the drive, unlike others. Her tone was drenched in sweet poison, each syllable crafted to sound gentle while cutting deep. My father added, "She's the one we can count on. The one who'll carry the name forward." They didn't know I was sitting just 5 rows behind them, and they had no idea what I had become. To them, I was still the girl who joined the army at 19, a waste of potential. I was the one who disappeared overseas, spent years in deserts they couldn't pronounce, and came home quieter, older, invisible. Still renting apartments like a nomad, my mother once scoffed. Still hiding in uniforms. But what they never knew, what I never told them, is that I hadn't just served. I had commanded. I'd risen through the ranks to become Brigadier General Evelyn Brooks. I'd led humanitarian missions, crisis response units, coordinated joint commands across 3 continents. I had people who saluted when I entered a room. I'd been awarded medals they never even asked about. Because to them, my worth was still measured in domesticity, in dinner invites, dresses worn, LinkedIn profiles shared. They couldn't understand the weight of service, of sacrifice, of the silence it demanded. And on that day, as they toasted Olivia with champagne flutes and sparkling smiles, they did it without knowing the wind was already shifting. Because less than 10 minutes later, a Black Hawk helicopter would land on the edge of Stanford's graduation field. And every single person who had ignored me, including my parents, would turn to stare. Because I wasn't just some ghost in the back row. I was the one being called forward. If you've ever sat in silence while others took credit for your sacrifices, leave a like. You're not invisible, not anymore. Now stay with me, because what happened next flipped everything upside down. The moment the helicopter's rotors sliced through the California air, the ceremony stopped cold. At first, it was just a distant hum like bees far off. Then it grew louder, stronger. Chairs rattled, hats flew, confetti scattered in all directions. People gasped and squinted upward, shielding their eyes from the wind and sun. Faculty members froze mid-sentence. One professor even dropped her notes. A toddler cried. Olivia turned her head, lips parted, confused. And then they saw it. A matte black UH-60 Black Hawk, circling in low over the graduation tent, emblazoned with no unit insignia, no university partnership label. Just sleek authority. Silent power. I stood slowly. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just with purpose. I could feel it in my bones, that military instinct humming to life. The posture, the clarity, the readiness. It had been years since I stood before an audience that didn't know what I was. But this time, I didn't need to say a word. The moment would speak for itself. As the helicopter descended, its wind lifted the hem of my jacket. Beneath it, my dark green dress uniform caught the light. Silver trim, crisp brass, 4 bars at the shoulder, 2 rows of ribbons over my chest. I walked down the aisle. Every head turned. My mother's mouth dropped open, a tight gasp half-formed. My father stood instinctively, hands twitching at his sides, trying to understand what he was seeing. Olivia blinked, bouquet trembling in her grip. No one said my name, but they all knew. The chopper touched down at the edge of the quad. Doors flung open. Dust kicked up. And out stepped a man in full combat dress, boots, laced collar-high, mirrored sunglasses locked onto the crowd. He didn't hesitate. He raised his hand in salute and called out, voice cutting through the wind. "General Brooks, the department needs you. Now." A collective hush rippled across the lawn. Cell phones shot into the air. People scrambled to record. Whispers turned to gasps. Did he say, "General, who is she? Is that part of the ceremony?" But I wasn't looking at them. I locked eyes with my sister. Olivia's jaw slackened, the corners of her painted smile faltering. Her hand slipped, and her bouquet fell, red roses scattering across her silver heels like blood at her feet. My father sat down hard. My mother blinked twice, lips parting in disbelief. And then the man, Lieutenant Colonel Mason Grant, stepped forward and saluted again. "Ma'am," he said, "this is urgent and classified. We've got a security breach with your clearance tags all over it." I nodded once, calm, but inside, I knew exactly what that meant. Someone was using my credentials. Someone had broken through the walls I spent 20 years building. And whoever it was, they did it knowing I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't question, that I was too silent, too obedient, too invisible. They were wrong. And if you've ever had your name misused, your silence mistaken for weakness, tell me in the comments below. Because the next part of my story, it's where everything changes. The moment my boots hit the grass, the ceremony was no longer about Olivia. It became about me, though, not in the way I ever wanted. As I crossed the quad toward the helicopter, every pair of eyes followed. Professors, trustees, graduates, family members, donors. They all turned, not because I demanded it, but because something undeniable was unfolding in front of them. The kind of moment that doesn't ask for attention. It commands it. Lieutenant Colonel Grant stood by the open door of the Black Hawk, still crisp, still alert. He handed me a sealed folder, thick, official, stamped with the Department of Defense insignia. But it wasn't just orders. It was a signal. He said quietly, "Your ID's been used, General, on procurement requests, clearance codes, funding movements. It's subtle until it's not." My pulse quickened. I flipped open the first page. Transactions, authentication logs, all tied to my personal digital signature. But I hadn't signed anything in nearly a year. My clearance key was encrypted, locked behind a military firewall, inaccessible even to senior staff without biometric input. Or so I thought. I turned back toward the crowd. Olivia was still frozen. My parents were statues. My mother gripped her designer clutch like it was a life raft. My father leaned forward now, not with curiosity but calculation, as if he already suspected something, or already knew. Who accessed it? I asked, eyes still on him. Lieutenant Colonel Grant didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed me another document. A scan of a wire transfer, $750 as $100 approved under my name 6 weeks prior. Destination, a shell firm in Delaware. The withdrawal authorization, Robert Brooks, legal guardian. My spine straightened. "He listed himself as your proxy," Grant said. "Filed it through state channels. Said you were on a black site deployment, unreachable. We ran it through the archives. It's legit looking. But the signature doesn't match." I knew what that meant. He forged it. My own father. The man who once told me that honor was everything had stolen not just my name, but my trust, my rank, my silence. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. Not here. Not now. Grant added, "We've flagged it. But you need to see someone. A civilian specialist. Attorney. She's handled this kind of thing before." I nodded, folding the folder shut. I didn't need time to think. I didn't need space to process. I needed action. Because this wasn't just theft. It was betrayal. and it was about to get very, very public. As I climbed into the Black Hawk, I looked out once more at the lawn, at the rows of stunned faces, at Olivia still standing blinking at the sky, at my father whose eyes refused to meet mine. He didn't look away out of shame. He looked away because he knew I was coming, and that, this time, I wouldn't stay silent. The flight back to DC was silent except for the low hum of the rotors and the occasional rustle of documents in my lap. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My thoughts were loud enough to drown out everything else. My father had forged my signature. He'd claimed I was unreachable somewhere classified to gain access to my military clearance and reroute hundreds of thousands of dollars into shell corporations. He'd turned my service into a key for his own vault. I felt sick, but not surprised. That was the part that hit hardest. I met Angela Ruiz, the civilian attorney Lieutenant Colonel Grant had recommended, at a quiet office tucked near Judiciary Square. No signage, just a nameplate on the door and a long hallway lined with gray carpet and locked filing cabinets. Angela was sharp, composed mid-40s. She shook my hand without preamble and slid a stack of printed documents across the table. "Let's start with this," she said. "A scanned PDF of your power of attorney filed in July 2016. Recognize the signature." I studied it carefully. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. The pressure distribution was off. No hesitation strokes. Perfectly centered. Too perfect. "It's artificial," I murmured. Angela nodded. "Digitally created. Signature forgery software. Probably Signif Pro." A chill ran down my spine. "That software is banned from all military contractor networks," I said. "Exactly," she replied. "And yet, here it is on your file. Filed through a private finance portal used primarily by defense asset brokers." I closed my eyes briefly. I remembered where I was during that summer Afghanistan, embedded with Task Force Valor. No access to U.S. servers, no outside contact beyond encrypted satellite comms. There was no way I authorized any of this. Angela leaned forward. "If we can prove you were deployed at the time, and that you never gave verbal or written consent, this becomes federal fraud under U.S. Code 1028. Identity misrepresentation at the military level." She flipped to another document. This one lists a recipient account belonging to a company called Mason Bridge Logistics, supposedly a transport vendor. But that vendor has one managing officer. I didn't breathe. She turned the paper around and tapped the name at the bottom. Robert Brooks. My hands curled slowly into fists. It was him. All this time. Behind the scenes. Using my service as a smokescreen. Using my identity as a passkey. Using my silence as permission. I looked up. "How far can we take this?" Angela's voice dropped into something low and firm. "As far as you're willing to go. If you want to stop here, we can bury this quietly. But if we push, really push, this won't just expose him. It will bury his name, his reputation, his business, and probably your family." I nodded, jaw tight. And yet I said only 5 words. "Then let's build the case. If you've ever had someone steal something that defined you, your name, your work, your trust, comment below with just 1 word enough. Let's make them listen." Because what came next wasn't just personal, it was war. Angela wasted no time. Within 24 hours, we had a digital forensic analyst, a financial crimes investigator, and a security clearance compliance officer looped into a secure war room inside her firm. It wasn't flashy. No leather chairs or mahogany tables. Just whiteboards, LED monitors, and a long table stacked with binders, hard drives, and classified audit logs. I wasn't there to sit on the sidelines. I sat at that table in full uniform sleeves, rolled boots, still dusted from the field. This wasn't about legal theatrics. It was about evidence. And we had plenty. Jordan Lee, the digital analyst, was the first to speak. He was young, clean-cut, and brilliant. "Your signature was replicated with layering software," he explained, pulling up a file on the screen. "This isn't a scan. It's an embedded vector signature." The document has metadata showing it was created on a system registered to an IP address in Arlington, Virginia. Angela looked at me. That's your father's home address, right? I nodded. Used to be. Jordan zoomed in on another data point. But that's not all. The file contains a stegraphic payload, a hidden zip archive embedded inside the document. We extracted it. He tapped a few keys and a blurred image appeared. A Georgia state driver's license. My face, or something close to it, but the eye color was slightly off and the background didn't match any DMV standard. I've never lived in Georgia, I said coldly. Angela added, but someone used this to authenticate identity verification for a $400,000 revolving credit line. Every corner we turned revealed another layer. Angela held up a folder. Mason Bridge Logistics wasn't the only firm. Your identity was also used in Meridian Impact LLC, another shell company registered to a business park in Fairfax. Let me guess, I said. Another name tied to Robert Brooks. Jordan replied without looking up. Correct. He's listed as managing director. $800,000 passed through the account between 2017 and 2020, all using your clearance code as asset backing. I leaned back, heart hammering against my ribs. He didn't just steal my name. He turned me into a federal asset, a number on a spreadsheet used to secure lines of credit, shield illegal transactions, and move money under a banner of military trust. I was a soldier, not a shield, and he used that distinction against me. Angela placed another folder in front of me. We need a witness. Someone from inside one of the companies. Someone who saw the paperwork, who questioned it. I stared at the folder for a long moment, then asked, and what if we find someone? Then we're not just bringing this to court, Angela said. We're bringing it to the Inspector General, the Department of Defense, and, if necessary, the press. I exhaled slowly, staring at the redacted files scattered around me. I'd always believed family was sacred. But this wasn't sacred. This was strategic. And I wasn't about to be used again. You ever trusted someone just because they share your blood and they burned you anyway? Share your story below. I'm listening. We all are. Because truth doesn't hide. It builds. Brick by brick. And we were just getting started. Her name was Deborah Chan, and she didn't hesitate. We met her in a quiet back room of Angela's firm late in the afternoon. No cameras, no press. Just her clutching an old laptop like it was a shield. She looked tired, not just from age, but from knowing too much for too long. I was a senior accountant at Meridian Impact LLC, she began, voice trembling, but steady. I left in 2021, but before that, I saw things I couldn't explain. Or more accurately, things no one wanted explained. Angela nodded. Let's start with what you brought. Deborah opened her laptop and pulled up a scan. A fax cover sheet dated October 2016, sent from Robert Brooks's personal office line. The recipient Meridian's internal server. Attached was a single-page authorization bearing my name and a digital signature. The moment I saw it, Deborah said I knew something was off. It had no initials, no routing trail, and it was already signed when it arrived. Did you confront him? I asked. She hesitated. I asked him directly once. He told me word for word. It's already been cleared through channels beyond your pay grade. Angela wrote it down instantly. Next came Jordan. He tapped on the screen and pulled up an archived internal email dated February 2019. Subject secure using CM clearance, no delays. The initials hit me like a punch to the gut. CM Claire Morgan, my clearance, used as an override in a system I never accessed. Angela stepped toward the whiteboard and began building the chain. Fraudulent signature embedded digitally. IP traced to Robert's address. Internal fax from his office. Deborah's testimony confirming anomalies. Clearance-based approval logs. 5 data points, each one sharper than the last. But we weren't done. Reese entered next, my second in command during Northern Ops, now liaison between our team and the DoD. He held a sealed envelope. Found this buried in an old compliance archive, he said. Internal DoD memo from 2017. Subject line reads, CM fallback liability, emergency use only. Angela paled. That phrase she whispered is code used when civilians attempt to leverage military credentials to insulate financial risk. It's rare, it's a red flag, and someone buried it. I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because everything we'd found confirmed the one thing I had refused to admit until now. My father had not just crossed a line, he'd built his entire legacy on my back. And if someone ever tried to build their empire using your silence, comment "no more" below. Because silence isn't strength when it protects the wrong people. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about making sure everyone knew exactly who had stolen it. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. The apartment was quiet but not peaceful. Papers were stacked across the dining table, evidence logs, deployment reports, Reese's encrypted notes, timelines of every forged transaction dating back to 2016. I'd memorized them, not out of duty, out of survival. Just after 6 a.m., a message from Angela lit up my phone. "We're confirmed. The review board will see us at 10. He's been subpoenaed. And he's bringing Sophie." I stared at the text for a long moment. Then I got dressed. My uniform had always been armor, but today, it would be a blade. The hearing chamber wasn't a courtroom, but it might as well have been. Frosted glass windows, dull gray carpet, and a round table at the center where 3 senior officers from the Department of Defense Review Board sat with folded hands and unreadable faces. Angela stood beside me, calm, collected. Reese flanked her left. On the opposite side, Robert Brooks sat in a slate suit, polished, proud, unmoved. Next to him, Sophie, wearing navy blue, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. A stranger now. The lead commissioner opened with protocol. "This preliminary review will assess the validity of the claims brought forth by Brigadier General Evelyn Brooks regarding identity fraud, financial misconduct, and unauthorized use of classified clearance." Angela rose first. Her tone didn't waver. "We intend to demonstrate through forensic documents, witness testimony, and verified military logs that between 2016 and 2021, Mr. Robert Brooks misused the name security clearance and digital signature of his daughter, General Brooks, to authorize illegal financial activity for personal gain." She submitted the forged PDF with the embedded signature layer. She submitted the IP logs from Robert's home network. She played the email thread referencing CM clearance, no delays. She entered the transaction record naming Robert Brooks as legal guardian. And then she played it. The audio clip. "She's deployed. Doesn't need to be involved. I'm her legal proxy. We'll push it through. No, she won't know. She trusts me. I'm her father." The room turned to stone. My father sat back, jaw-clenched, eyes fixed on the table. Sophie didn't look at him. Not even once. Angela turned toward the commissioners. "We also submit that this account opened in General Brooks's name lists Sophie Brooks as the sole secondary beneficiary. The funds were drawn from a siphoned military logistics contract." Robert finally moved. What Sophie said barely audible. "That can't be right." Angela turned the screen. Her name was there, typed beneath mine. It couldn't be mistaken. "You used me," she whispered to him. "You said it was for all of us that it was secured. But you used me." He said nothing. Didn't flinch, didn't defend. The commissioner closed the folder. "We will reconvene in 72 hours for final determination." The gavel dropped. I stood and looked at him. "You didn't just betray me," I said softly. "You turned me into a tool. A name you could sign, steal, and then forget. And finally, he looked away. If you've ever stood in front of someone who denied you for years and told your truth anyway, comment below with the word truth, because telling it out loud, that's where healing begins. We walked out of that room in silence, but something irreversible had happened inside. Not just to me, to all of us. 3 days passed, but they felt like a war of their own. Not a war with weapons, but with headlines, stares, and whispers. The story had leaked. Of course it had. Not through us, we kept everything sealed, but through someone aligned with my father. The article appeared in Financial Insight Weekly, discreetly slotted between board appointment news and market forecasts. Power struggles inside prominent Brooks family. Veterans' allegations raise eyebrows. They didn't print my name directly, but they didn't need to. They used a photo taken during Olivia's graduation the moment I stepped toward the helicopter. Uniform, crisp gaze, direct face sharpened by contrast and shadows. The image said it all: danger, disruption, instability. Angela dropped the magazine onto the table during our strategy meeting. Her face was tight. Guess who wrote it? Maxwell Denton. Used to ghostwrite for your father's firm a decade ago. Of course he did. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded. So this is the tactic now. Angela nodded. Distraction, discredit, delay. But the distraction didn't come from the press. It came later that same evening, in the form of Sophie. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, her makeup barely intact, her voice stiff with accusation. You started this, she snapped, holding up the magazine like a weapon. No, I said, but I'll finish it. She took a step closer. Mom says you're spiraling, that you're trying to take us all down just because you're jealous. I almost laughed. Jealous of what? A fake account opened in my name, military clearance turned into collateral, or that sweet beneficiary line under your name. She blinked, stunned. That's not possible. You were listed, I said calmly. I didn't do it. But you're the one who gained from it. Her lips parted, then closed again. No rebuttal, no defense. Dad built everything we had, she said. Finally, voice quieter now. He paid for my tuition, my apartment, everything. With my name, I replied, and the words cut sharper than I intended. And you knew something wasn't right. You always did. She didn't argue. She didn't apologize either. She left the magazine on my steps and walked away. By morning, I was summoned to a private inquiry by the Alliance of Distinguished Veterans, an informal panel that advised the department on conduct and integrity within the force. The hearing room was polished wood and silence. 3 retired generals sat opposite me, stern-faced, brows drawn tight. We're receiving inquiries, General Brooks one began. Rumors, concerns, allegations. I stared at them calmly. My record is clean. My deployments are documented. My access is confirmed. What's not clean is what someone did with my name while I was serving. A long pause. Then the lead commissioner asked gently, Are you prepared to carry this through alone if necessary? I didn't hesitate. I've already been alone. This isn't new. They didn't respond. But I saw the flicker of understanding pass between them. That night, I stared at the image in the magazine again, the one they'd darkened, distorted, turned against me. And I felt the anger swell. Not because they misrepresented me, but because they almost succeeded. Then a message came in from Ben, our cyber forensics lead. Saw the article. Don't let him define the narrative. Your truth is still yours. And if you've ever had someone twist your story before you could tell it, type "my turn" in the comments. Because sometimes silence isn't survival, it's surrender. And I was done surrendering. The cold air hit me as I stepped off the plane at Fort Carson, Colorado, a place that smelled of gun oil, dust, and discipline, the only place where the world made sense. It had been 6 years since I last stood on this tarmac. Back then, I was boarding a flight bound for Djibouti, ready to lead a multinational task force. Today, I returned not as a soldier sent on a mission, but as a woman fighting to reclaim her name. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Griffin greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing smile. His silver hair a testament to time's passing, but his posture still sharp. Evelyn, it's been too long, he said quietly. I read between the lines. I know why you're here. Inside a dimly lit archive room filled with the scent of old paper and polished wood, Marcus slid a thick folder across the table. It contained my official deployment logs for 2016, every movement, timestamp, and location recorded and encrypted. My boots were on Romanian soil on April 9, 2016, the very day when a contract supposedly signed by me was forged in Washington, D.C. This is the nail, Marcus said, pointing at the exact entry. He then pulled out a small flash drive. And here's something interesting, a flagged secure call from the Department of Defense that year. Someone saying, She's deployed, doesn't need to be involved. I'm her legal proxy. My stomach twisted. It was my father's voice. The man who had betrayed me, speaking as if my silence was permission. Angela, who joined us moments later, connected the drive to her secure laptop. The voice played again, crystal clear in the quiet room. No, she won't know. She trusts me. I'm her father. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. This wasn't just about stolen money. It was about stolen identity, stolen dignity, and the cold realization that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most, type broken trust below, because healing starts with facing the hardest truths. I looked up at Angela, ready. It's time we take this all the way. The hearing room was sterile beige walls, cold fluorescent lights, and a long polished table separating me from the panel of federal investigators. I stood tall in my uniform, feeling the weight of every medal and every battle that had brought me here. Opposite me sat Robert Brooks, flanked by two sharp-suited attorneys. Sophie was beside him, her posture rigid, eyes darting between us and the silent audience. The tension was electric, the air thick with unspoken accusations and bitter history. The lead investigator opened the session. General Brooks, today we examine claims of identity fraud, unauthorized use of military clearance, and financial misconduct tied to your father, Mr. Robert Brooks. You may proceed. Angela took the floor first, her voice steady and commanding. She presented the meticulously gathered evidence, the forged digital signatures, the IP logs tracing back to Robert's home, the fraudulent financial transactions siphoning military funds through shell companies. She played the damning audio clip, Robert's own voice admitting to exploiting my clearance while I was deployed overseas. The room fell silent. Robert rose slowly, attempting to justify his actions. The markets were volatile. Our family's assets were at risk. I acted to protect them. I did what I had to. I met his gaze without hesitation. You acted without me. You used my name as a weapon, not as a shield. I am not your property to be wielded. Sophie's gaze dropped to the table, her face a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. Angela handed over the final document, a bank account opened under my name, but listing Sophie as the sole beneficiary, a chilling link tying my sister unknowingly into the scheme. The commissioner announced a recess, signaling the weight of the evidence was undeniable. As I stood to leave, I whispered to Robert, "You didn't just betray me. You turned me into a tool, a name to be signed, stolen, and discarded." For once, he didn't look away. If you've ever faced betrayal that cut deeper than words, share your strength in the comments by typing resilience, because standing tall is the first step toward freedom. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a battle for truth, for justice, for reclaiming what was stolen. After the recess, the atmosphere in the hearing room had shifted. The initial shock had settled, replaced by a tense anticipation as everyone awaited the testimonies and evidence that would determine the outcome of this deeply personal and public trial. I sat alongside Angela and Reese, my trusted allies, feeling the weight of every moment as the panel reconvened. The first witness called was Deborah Chan, the former senior accountant at Meridian Impact LLC. She entered the room with a quiet dignity, her hands slightly trembling but her voice unwavering. Sitting before the commission, she recounted the irregularities she had observed during her tenure, highlighting the suspicious timing and signatures of documents bearing my name. She confirmed that faxes with my forged signature originated directly from my father's personal office, a revelation that drew gasps and whispered exchanges from those in attendance. As she detailed her experience, it became clear that the fraud was not a haphazard act, but a meticulously orchestrated scheme. Deborah spoke of being silenced by veiled threats, a tactic to keep her quiet about the fraudulent activities she had uncovered. Her courage in coming forward was a pivotal moment, shining a harsh light on the deceit that had taken root within the family. Following, Deborah Jordan Lee, our digital forensic expert, presented the results of his exhaustive analysis. With precision and clarity, he explained how the digital signatures were crafted using sophisticated software, embedding fake signatures and metadata to mask the forgery. He displayed graphs mapping the IP addresses back to my father's residence, and timelines correlating with my deployment overseas. Every piece of data reinforced the fact that these fraudulent activities were conducted without my knowledge or consent. The panel listened intently as Angela submitted a stack of official deployment logs, confirming that I was stationed abroad during the periods these documents were signed. The logs detailed every movement and communication, painting a clear picture of my physical absence and unavailability. It was irrefutable evidence that I could not have authorized any of the financial transactions under scrutiny. Angela then introduced a sealed memo, an internal document flagged for fallback liability, a term used in military protocol when classified information is potentially misused. She read aloud the significance of the memo, emphasizing that it indicated an attempt to use my clearance to shield illicit financial dealings. The weight of this document settled over the room like a heavy fog. Throughout the proceedings, my father remained stoic, but visibly tense. His lawyers made several objections, but the mounting evidence made their arguments increasingly untenable. The commissioner finally called for a brief recess as the atmosphere thickened with unspoken truths and strained family dynamics. During the recess, Sophie approached me hesitantly. Her eyes were clouded with confusion and hurt, but there was an unmistakable flicker of empathy. "How long have you known?" she whispered in our native language, her voice barely audible. I held her hand, a silent acknowledgement of shared pain and the complex bonds that tether us. As we returned to the hearing room, I felt a resolve hardening within me. This was no longer about proving a point or seeking vengeance. It was about reclaiming my identity, my honor, and ensuring that justice prevailed. When the hearing resumed, the room was filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Angela presented the final pieces of evidence and formally accused my father of identity fraud, misrepresentation, and abuse of classified information. Her words echoed through the chamber, a solemn declaration that marked the beginning of the end for the facade he had built. The proceedings would continue over the next several days, but in that moment I knew we had already won something far greater: a voice, a truth, and the courage to face whatever came next. If you've ever had to confront betrayal within your own family, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Together we can break the silence and find strength in truth. The days following the hearing were filled with a tense anticipation, a quiet before the storm of final judgments. But behind the scenes, the battle was far from over. The media had caught wind of the case, and the city buzzed with speculation and whispers about the Brooks family's fractured legacy. Headlines painted pictures of betrayal, deception, and high-stakes family drama that captured the attention of every corner of the country. Despite the growing public scrutiny, I remained focused. I had no desire to be a media spectacle. What mattered was the truth and the legal reckoning that awaited. Angela worked tirelessly, coordinating with federal prosecutors, compiling documents, and preparing for the next hearing. Reese stood by me, a steady presence and a reminder of the loyalty and honor I still had amidst the chaos. One afternoon, as I sat reviewing financial records in my temporary office, my phone buzzed. It was Sophie. Her message was simple: I resigned. I can't stay in that office knowing how I got there. Her words hit me like a punch. The sister who once stood beside our parents had finally recognized the truth and chosen to step away from the shadow cast by deceit. That evening, I visited the old Brooks estate on Westchester Lane. The house, once a symbol of our family's stature, now felt hollow. The grand piano was gone, and the walls that once held family portraits were bare, leaving pale, empty rectangles like scars that refused to heal. Elaine, my mother, sat quietly in the living room, smaller somehow, her elegance dulled by the weight of unspoken regrets. She didn't greet me, didn't ask why I came. She only said, "You always knew, and yet you still came back." I looked at her, really looked. The woman who told me love was earned through usefulness, who dismissed me as a ghost, was now just a person flawed and vulnerable. I didn't argue or accuse. I sat across from her because ghosts too return home sometimes. Not for vengeance, not for answers, but for the echo of what should have been. And in that silence something shifted, because the uniform I wore had never made me worthy. What made me worthy was what I had survived. The final hearing was held in the Grand Hall of the Pentagon, filled with over 500 officials, journalists, and civilians. As I stood at the edge of the stage, the spotlight didn't blind me. It illuminated the path I had carved out for myself through years of silence, pain, and resolve. The Master of Ceremonies read the citation: "For unwavering integrity in the face of institutional betrayal and exemplary service in classified operations overseas, Major General Evelyn Brooks is hereby awarded the Distinguished Service Medal." The applause was slow at first, but it grew in acknowledgement not just of a military career but of a life reclaimed. Reese sat in the front row, eyes never leaving mine. Sophie was nearby, no tears, just quiet respect. At the podium I spoke with a voice steady and clear. I was told this moment would feel like redemption, but redemption implies I had something to apologize for. I stand here today not because I was perfect, but because I refused to disappear. I refused to be erased by silence, even when that silence came from those who should have protected me. From behind me, Reese whispered, "I think they're listening, Evelyn." And for the first time in a long time, I breathed. If you believe in standing up for your truth, even when no one else will share your story below, together we turn whispers into roars. The weeks after the ceremony were a strange mix of calm and storm. I returned to a life that felt more mine than it ever had yet. The echoes of the fight still lingered in every quiet moment. The media coverage had calmed down, but the legal battle was far from over. My father's name was tarnished, his empire shaken, and the family fractures exposed to light that wouldn't easily dim. I spent long hours reflecting on everything: the betrayal, the pain, and the unexpected strength that had carried me through. I realized then that the scars left by family aren't just wounds. They're also markers of resilience, lessons etched deep. Sophie and I didn't speak much, but there was an unspoken understanding between us now. The sister I once thought lost to the family's shadows was slowly finding her own light. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. One evening, Angela and I met at a quiet cafe far from the spotlight. We talked strategy, but also about life, the kind of conversations I hadn't had in years. She reminded me that justice isn't always neat or immediate, but every truth spoken is a victory. I knew my journey was far from over. The court cases, the hearings, the whispers, they would continue. But I had learned something vital: identity and honor cannot be stolen without a fight. And reclaiming them is a form of freedom. That freedom wasn't about proving my worth to anyone else. It was about standing in my own truth, no matter how painful or complicated. I began rebuilding my definition of family, not by blood, but by trust, respect, and unwavering support. The friends who stood by me, the colleagues who believed in me, the legal team who fought tirelessly, all became my chosen family. At night, I'd often look at the medal beside a faded photo of my old unit, the men and women who never got the recognition they deserved. They had carried me through darkness, and I owed them this fight. Not just for me, but for them. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it was mine to walk. If you've ever had to redefine family and find strength outside of pain, share your journey in the comments, because healing is a path we walk together, step by step, story by story. This isn't just my story, it's ours, and the next chapter is waiting to be written. After the emotional weight of the hearings and the public revelations, I found myself retreating to a quiet office assigned to me at the Pentagon, a small, unassuming room that smelled faintly of wood polish and late-night coffee. It was far from glamorous, but it was mine. On the desk sat a simple wooden box, its surface worn and familiar. Inside lay my distinguished service medal polished to a soft shine, resting beside a faded, creased photograph of my unit during our last mission together. Those were the faces of people who never received the honors they deserved, their names, rarely spoken beyond whispered remembrances. I placed the medal beside that picture and closed the box, gently feeling a mixture of closure and an aching silence. Justice had come, but late and imperfect. It wasn't a triumphant roar. It was a quiet reckoning carved out of courage and resolve. The courtroom battles and media storms faded into a background hum compared to the internal journey I had endured. The scars from my father's betrayal were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had stepped out of the shadows of my family's secrets and into my own light. Life after the hearing wasn't easy. Family gatherings were strained, some relationships severed beyond repair. Sophie had distanced herself, seeking solace in new beginnings. My mother's coldness remained, though tempered with a shadow of regret. But I had learned to find peace not in their acceptance, but in my own resilience. The people who truly mattered were those who stood by me unconditionally, the friends, the comrades, the legal team, who believed in the truth. One evening, I stood by the window of my apartment watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky. Memories of the past mingled with hopes for the future. I thought about the lessons carved into my heart, the importance of speaking out, of reclaiming one's identity, and of building a chosen family when blood ties fail. And then, as the night deepened, I whispered to myself a promise to live boldly, to honor those who couldn't, and to never let silence be a weapon again. If you've ever faced betrayal, loss, or the shattering of trust, remember this: your story matters. Your truth is your strength. Share it, because in our voices lies the power to heal and to rebuild. If this story has touched you, if you believe in courage over silence, leave a comment. Let's stand together, rewrite our narratives, and build families chosen not by blood, but by love and loyalty. Because sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that don't make the headlines, they live in the quiet hearts of those who refuse to give up. Months passed since the legal battles and public scrutiny, yet the echoes of what I endured remained etched in my soul. The scars from betrayal and silence were reminders of a journey that reshaped my understanding of identity, family, and resilience. I found solace not in the approval of those who abandoned me, but in the strength forged through perseverance and truth. In the quiet moments, I reflected on the transformation I had undergone. The uniform I wore was more than fabric and medals. It symbolized a commitment to integrity, honor, and service, not just to my country, but to myself. I realized that my worth was not defined by the approval of my family, but by my unwavering dedication to who I am and what I stand for. Reconnecting with old comrades and trusted allies, I began to build a new circle, a chosen family, bound by respect and loyalty rather than blood. These relationships nurtured my healing and empowered me to face each day with renewed purpose. Though the path was fraught with challenges, I embraced the lessons learned. I understood that forgiveness was a personal journey, and that sometimes the bravest act was to walk away from those who refused to change. My story became one of reclaiming autonomy, standing firm against injustice, and finding peace within. As I moved forward, I committed myself to advocacy, supporting others who faced similar betrayals and encouraging them to raise their voices. Sharing my experience was not just catharsis, it was a beacon of hope for those trapped in silence. If you've ever had to redefine yourself in the aftermath of betrayal, if you're walking your own path toward healing, share your story below. Let's create a community where courage and truth are celebrated and where no one has to stand alone. Because life's greatest strength comes from the resilience of the human spirit and the bonds we choose to hold dear. The journey I've shared is not just a tale of pain or victory. It's a testament to the power of truth, courage, and the freedom to reclaim one's identity. In facing betrayal, I discovered resilience. In embracing silence, I found strength. And in choosing my own family, I embraced hope. To anyone watching who feels unseen, unheard, or broken, know this: your story matters. Your voice has the power to break barriers, to heal wounds, and to inspire change. You are not defined by the betrayals you've suffered, but by the courage with which you rise. If you resonate with this story, if you believe in the right to live authentically and with dignity, join this community. Subscribe, share your experiences, and be part of a movement that honors bravery and truth. Together we rewrite narratives. Together we find healing. Together we build families from the ashes of the past and the promise of tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Your courage is the legacy that carries us all forward.